Okay, all right. So we've got a really great turnout for our webinar. So welcome to everybody and thank you for joining us. It's not really a very formal session today. It's really just to get some insights and feedback from the 5 people who attended the GGBN conference that was in Mexico in October. So just a little bit of background. The Biodiversity Biobanks South Africa, it's a network of biodiversity biobanks, and it's part of the Department of Science and Innovation's Research Infrastructure Program. We joined as a network, we joined the Global Genome Biodiversity Network, I think about 2 or 3 years ago, and I think the zoo had some involvement in GGBN before that. I never really thought that we would be able to send people to an international conference. I didn't think that we would have budget available, and I didn't really know whether it would be worth the investment. Anyway, then it turned out that there was interest in attending the international conference. And I started to realize that it's very important for us to not sit isolated as a country, as a national network, for us to be isolated from what's happening in the rest of the world. And I've become increasingly aware of how much is happening in terms of biobanking across the world. It is becoming a real priority in many countries and globally for a whole range of different purposes. So from conservation to biotechnology to food security, so for a whole lot of reasons. And so I decided fairly early this year that it would be good to support a limited number of people to attend the GGBN conference in Mexico. And what I did was I asked the managers of the participating institutions, so those institutions that participate in the BBSA, I asked them to nominate somebody from their institution to attend the conference. And we got those nominations, and then it was quite a long process to get approval through SANBI. And just as we thought everything was fine, Treasury put in place a whole lot of restrictions on expenditure, and so then we couldn't move forward. And eventually, by the time we got approval to move forward with the arrangements to attend the conference, it was quite late and it was very stressful. The people who were involved know that you know, getting visas and trying to get travel bookings, flights and accommodation was a real stress. Anyway, it worked out in the end for 5 people, and they went. And for a couple of us, we attended virtually. So they weren't going to have online attendance at the conference. And then they opened it up quite late. And so a couple of us, I think Leana from ARC and myself, and the 2 postdocs, Reka and Felix, were able to attend virtually, which meant sitting until very late at night participating. But it was really great, and it was quite an eye-opener. But I think it would be really good to hear from the people who were actually physically there and to get their input and feedback on how it all went and what they learned. It was a very long journey. I'm sure somebody will give us some insights into that. I think 4 flights to get to the middle of Mexico, and then all the way back. So we're looking really forward to hearing from everybody who attended, and there'll be opportunity for people to ask questions as well. All right, Nick, do you want to just explain how it will all work and introduce the panel?
Hi everyone, in case you don't know me, I'm the BBSA comms person. For today, just a few house rules, guidance. You can feel free to say hi in the chat. You can feel free to drop questions in the chat or anything like that. I'll be monitoring it to see what's going on. But also there'll be opportunities to chat, to ask questions after each individual presentation. If you have questions for the individuals who attended, And then at the end, if you still have questions, we can deal with a few of those. So the BBSA was fortunate enough to send no fewer than 5 of the community to the GGBN this year, which I gather is the largest number of physical delegates from any country, and that's not including our virtual attendees as well. Today, you'll just be hearing from the 5 who physically attended, and that can tell us about the wonders of Mexico. That's Dr. Adepemi Ogundeji. She's the Biobank Curator at the University of Freese State's Yeast Culture Collection Biobank. Dr. Anita Berger. She's the Research and Innovation Manager at the University of the Western Cape's Institute for Microbial Biotechnology and Metagenomics. Sorry, that's always a difficult one to say. IMBM is much easier. Kim Labuschagne, she's the Biobank Director of the SANBI Wildlife Biobank. That includes herpetology, mammals, etc. Leana Freese, she's the Veterinary Technologist at SANParks Veterinary Wildlife Biobanks. And then finally, Dr. Mudzuli Mavhunga, she's the Biobank Curator of the other SANBI Biobank, the SANBI Indigenous Plant DNA Biobank. They all went there with their various specialties, presented, learned, made partnerships. So we're all looking forward to hearing from them. So without further ado, Adepemi, would you like to start us off?
Oh, yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity, which I'm grateful, and thank you, Nick, for putting all this together. And I want to welcome everyone. I hope I'm audible enough.
Yes, great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So today we want to talk about the Global Genome Biodiversity Network Conference 2023 that we attended and what we learned from it. Okay, so my content for this presentation or the talk about what we learned, I'll just give a brief introduction, although I've been properly introduced, and what the conference and the section were like, and what I think Biobank gained from it, especially from my side, this culture collection, and also the BBSA, and what the trip was like. So as I've been introduced, my name is Adepemi Ogundeji. I'm the curator of the Yeast Culture Collection, located at the University of the Free State from the Department of Microbiology and Biochemistry. I have the opportunity to represent the Biodiversity Biobanks at Africa at the 2023 Global Genome Biodiversity Network, GGBN conference, which was held in Aguascalientes, Mexico, hosted by the Universidad Autónoma de Aguascalientes. And this happened in the month of October from the 17th to the 20th this year, 2023. And the conference focused on a wide array of topics from basic databasing processes to environmental specimens and data analysis, and we have different sessions and workshops. It was a gathering of academic institutions. We have various universities represented. Also, we have representatives from the private and public sectors. We also have members and non-members of the GBN community who are also interested in preserving and studying our world's biodiversity. But for us, we are members of GBN. And the conference, for me, was a great opportunity to be one of the representatives of BBSA. And it is a tremendous privilege to be part of such a prestigious global event. And more importantly for me, I saw it as an opportunity to be invited, as an awesome opportunity to be invited as a speaker to showcase the Yeast Culture Collection current holding on an international stage. And this is me presenting about Yeast Culture Collection from the picture you can see. And the importance of this conference cannot be overstated, even in our talk today, because it gives a unique platform for different biobanks to showcase their achievements, to share their experiences, and also build networks with peers and mentors from various backgrounds. And we have different sessions and workshops from infrastructure, sample management, and data. And under this, we look at genetic collections, including facilities and infrastructure. We have people that showcase their infrastructures, and we learn enough from them. And also, this part addressed issues related to long-term sustainability, address challenges around data, sample quality. We have a presentation on present use cases, insights regarding sample preservatives and preservation, DNA extractions, among others. We also learn about protocols and techniques for collection, preservation, authentication, and distribution for all types of culture collections. And we also had workshops on policies, on GGBN data standard, and workflows for publishing data. We were shown the collection handbook and workflows for publishing data. And you can also ask specific questions regarding publishing data to the GGBN committee. And we also have a session on Nagoya Protocol where awareness of assets and benefit sharing were created to legally manage the biological materials. And we were told and reminded that failure to comply can result in legal consequences. We also have General Assembly meeting where we're given updates on the status of GGBN activities around the current work plan. And we also had a meeting on GBN and the future of biodiversity biobanking. And this is where we discuss how GGBN is meeting its mission, which include identify areas to improve or scale back certain services to the community. So for me, the impact, I got to see what others are doing and also met with high-profile biobankers, which shows potential future collaborations. We've got some contacts. And also, I was introduced to GGBN website where you can have all your biobanking needs met. For example, on the website, you can see the protocols, SOPs, and they are consistently updating this information, these documents. All you need is to request to join the network and you will receive access login details via email. From the conference, I saw that I was the only one presented on yeast culture. I saw other people presented on microorganisms, but mostly bacteria and fungi. And this indicates that we have less or little yeast culture collection compared to other biobanks, except for a few popular ones across the globe. Although our yeast culture collection from the UFS, we are the largest in Africa, but yet we still need to be more visible. And this is one of the BBSA initiatives. So my take-home message is accessibility of our data. How can we give access to people? So after the conference, we've been able to submit our information to our ICT department, and they're currently working on it to assist us in creating a user-friendly online platform where we can give access of what we have in the collection to people. So, and my experience, just to show you the picture, somebody said a picture talks more than 1,000 words. So the first picture here shows when we got to Amsterdam. Like Michelle said, we had like 4 flights to get to where we were going. It was a long flight, but what's interesting, I had opportunity to mingle with these wonderful people from different biobanks in BBSA. And the second picture showing we met high-profile biobanking, Professor Oliver from San Diego is the one in front of us. And this is Gilberto from the host university and also the rest of us. The first night before the conference, we had icebreaker meeting where we meet with other people that came for the conference at a dinner in a nice restaurant. It was a beautiful experience for me. And these are other presenters from different countries that also came to showcase their biobanks, facilities and what they are doing. That's the second picture. And this the 5 of us that represented BBSA, and we were in a country, Aguascalientes. It was a very peaceful and safe environment. We had a nice time. We went around just to see how the city looks like. It was beautiful. So this is myself and Anita, and this is myself, Mudzuli. Kim is the major photographer, and Leana is just around as well. And this is me coming back to South Africa at the airport of Aguascalientes. Then we have breaking news. What did BBSA get? This is for BBSA and for all of us, and it's an exciting news. But should I say it? I think I'll wait for Kim to talk about it, or the rest of us. And lastly, I'd like to acknowledge my university, BBSA, SANBI, and the GGBN committee for the opportunity for us to attend the conference. And thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, Adepemi, for that presentation. And yeah, I think we'll wait for Kim to share the big news. Are there any questions for Adepemi? I don't see any in the chat, but if you'd like to, you can just unmute and ask or drop me a note. Seshni, you can go ahead.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I was just interested in one of your slides. You mentioned, I think it was GGBN was talking about the future of biobanking. And then you discussed that, and then you mentioned that they also discussed scaling back on community services. I'm curious about that, considering that especially in Africa, our biobanks are more trying to scale up. So I'm interested what that conversation was about.
Sorry? Can you repeat the question? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear now.
Okay, so in one of your slides, you mentioned that you discussed scaling back on community services. So I'm interested in knowing what was discussed there, because I mean, especially in Africa, most of the biobanks are trying to scale up. So I'm interested to hear what the conversation was like about scaling back.
Oh, okay. That's just like a general conversation. It's about, there are different biobanks, the animals, the fish, and marine. So scaling back, I think, if I remember correctly, it's about those that they already have their otherwise, if I don't answer correctly, the rest of the team, we shed more light on it. If I remember correctly, I think it's about those that already have their biobank full of the samples that they have. And that's when one of the things that they also discuss is about having a backup cryopreservation, which will help. So I think for this, for instance, speaks to particular type of biobanks, but not necessarily for my case.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, because same with our case as well. We want to scale up, not scale down.
Oh, sorry, I see my mic is muted. I said thank you. Like for me too, we would like to scale up, not to scale down.
Okay, are there no other questions for Adepemi? All right, then let me just ask one for myself quickly. You said you were the only yeast culture biobank that presented. Is that of all the attendees? There were no other yeast culture biobanks?
No other yeast culture biobanks except the one that are talking about microorganisms. It's the one that they were talking about from Brazil, but they are mostly bacteria and algae. And also we have someone that's presented or talked about fungi, but not yeast.
Okay. Okay, so I see there's not that many specialized ones in terms of the microbes then. Okay. Are there any other questions by Adepemi? All right, doesn't look like it. Thank you for your presentation. And since we spoke about microbes, we'll move on to our next speaker, which is the IMBM's Anita Berger. Anita, would you like to take over?
Yes, thank you, Nick. Michelle, thank you for pulling the ropes and getting us in Mexico. For me, personally, it was a huge opportunity, but also for the IMBM Biobank, I think it put us in a position where we can strategize more in a more informed manner. So just for the sake of the audience, my name is Anita Berger. I am the manager of the Microbial Biobank here at the University of the Western Cape. And as Nick so nicely said, the Institute for Microbial Biotechnology and Metagenomics. So the IMBM had a collection of bacteria for about, well, more than 10 years. But it's only since we joined, or we were approved as one of the biobanks of the BBSA program, that we really started to organize ourselves as a formal biobank and trying to meet the standards that the global standards that's associated with that. And one of the stars of the IMBM Biobank is also attending this webinar, Stephanie Lawrence, and I must really give her credit for all her work in this 2 years. So you can now understand that, you know, coming from just a microbial collection and now stepping up to being a national biobank, and since we joined the international of the GGBN, we are supposed to meet international standards. So for me, attending the conference was actually a huge learning curve. It was such a privilege to learn this from experts and in real life and personal discussions. So, like Michelle said, we became a member of the GGBN about 2 years ago, but I never had any interaction with them, and they were like this kind of, you know, pie in the sky and the people up there. And it was so amazing to meet them and to see that they are so approachable. So, and also the expertise that they have, it range across all aspects that's related or that's relevant to international biobanking. So for us, it really paved the way in growing the IMBM Biobank into what is expected on a national level. Just going back to the conference itself, is that I think this was one of the conferences that I attended where almost every session was relevant. Because, and like Adepemi explained, it went from ways of collecting. So I must say the microbial collections it was only the lady from Brazil that spoke about microbial material. So it was mostly mammalian, there were plants, other collections as well, different cell material types. Like something that was very interesting to me is organoids. I don't know how many of you have ever heard about organoids, but it's cells that manage or organize themselves in an organ-like manner, and the opportunity that provides to certain kinds of research. So there was this spectrum of discussions and topics, and everything was relevant. In particular, material exchange. So South Africa being one of the mega diverse countries, there are many countries that approach us, or I think Brazil is also one of the mega diverse countries, and to understand their challenges and how we should navigate ourselves around these to comply, but also to enable material sharing and research. Yeah, so I'm both the Biobank manager, but also the Institute's research and innovation manager. And as such, I'm tasked with looking at ways how to move things towards innovation. And I was so glad when we joined or became a member of the GGBN, because this actually provides us with the opportunity to showcase what we have on an international level. So our collection is not as big as some of other national biobanks, but still, as an institute, we would never be able to fully explore this. And participating on an international level provides us with mega opportunities for other people, you know, to access our material, for us to access material from other regions of the world and do comparative studies. So this is a huge research and innovation opportunity for us, both as the Biobank, but also as the Institute. Yeah, I think I've more or less, yeah, maybe I can just still comment to say it was really interesting to hear. Like I said, most other presentations was about mammalian or mammalian material or plant material, also material that's on the red list or highly managed and risked list, to understand their challenges and how they navigate around that. There were also people about, you know, things like different storage ways, like, for instance, liquid nitrogen versus just the normal -80s, and the different technologies that's becoming available to do that. So really interesting. And then I think for me, really the network. So not only did we have the opportunity to network with the conference participants, but I think for us as the BBSA, the 5 of us who attended, you know, I think this was the first time that we met in person, apart from other activities that gets us together. And for me, that was also very valuable in terms of our BBSA program. We often get requests for material, and this provides us now with a tool to pick up the phone or to pop an email to say, is this perhaps available in South Africa? Which again talk to how do we maximize the value that we derive from collections that we have in the country. So yeah, I think Adepemi showed all the social activities. It's really an interesting country. When Michelle told us about the opportunity, and I opened Google and it says, if you travel to Mexico, reconsider your travel. I was taken a step back, but Aguascalientes is really a lovely part of the country. People are hardworking, people are very helpful, considerate. There is not a piece of paper in the streets or on the campus. It's really a lovely part of Mexico. And I would love to see a collaboration between ourselves and the University of Aguascalientes, and definitely more formal collaboration between ourselves and some of the other national or international biobanks. And I think that's all from me. And again, Michelle, thank you so much for all your effort in getting us there. I really appreciate. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. That was very interesting, and I see it's already raised a few questions in the chat. Roger, you've asked a general question to all biobanks. Would you like Anita to address that now, or shall we save that for later for everyone?
No, it's fine. It's a general question to everybody. Thanks.
Okay, we'll deal with that after everyone's done then. Then it looks like Seshni again. Seshni asks, did you come across any interesting new technologies that they could potentially incorporate into their biobanks for future expansion? Seshni over at SAIB. Is that right, Seshni, or would you like to add to that question?
No, that's fine. That's perfect. Thanks, Nick.
Right.
Yeah. So, like I said, some things were general because it applies to whatever material you have in the biobank, but some of them are specific. So I think the question, there are some biobanks with just thousands and thousands of entries. So, how much material do you keep? How do you keep the material? Is it dried? Is it in liquid nitrogen? Is it on paper discs? So that would be specific to the material that you store. Then there were also, about temperature management, and like I said, -80s versus those liquid dewas versus supply of liquid nitrogen. So lots of stuff depending on the material that you stock. I can just add that all in all, the record that you keep, your database, and I must say there was a gentleman who showed, I think it was a presentation from the EMBRC, if I'm not mistaken, who showed the tool that they developed to search the biobank. And I think that's still something that we're aiming as a BBSA for South Africa, that the holdings of the different biobanks is searchable to some extent by somebody who's interested in something. So a lot of emphasis on database of record management as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks, Anita. Just a follow-up question, if you don't mind, regarding the tool that you just mentioned now. So if I understand correctly, so this is something that is like an online tool, publicly available online tool where anyone can search what's in the biobank. Is that what you is that what
I
the
think
tool
the
is?
the different biobanks definitely should have a tool, but I think that's also something that certainly the INBM hasn't developed that, a searching tool. And I think ideally, if I could have a wish, if somehow the South African biobanks can be linked and one can search to some extent for something that's available in the country.
Yeah, that would be cool. Cool, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Seshni, for the question, and Anita for the answer. Are there any more questions for Anita? All right. Then just one from me. Sorry, just interested. You spoke, Anita, about the strength of the networking that you found there, both within the BBSA community and with the international attendees that you might want to partner with in future. Were there any opportunities that have developed into something so far, or that you've been pursuing, or that you think are very much worth pursuing?
The one that I was most interested in is with a lady, and I don't have a name with me, but the lady from Brazil on the microorganisms, because sometimes there's the need to acquire specific microbes from another area. And also when it comes to specific things around maybe storage, or when it comes to, genome analyses and bioinformatics and things, it's really great to have a contact on the international level that you can ask for advice or to collaborate on that level. And I understand that she expressed her interest in the collaboration with South Africa, so I would definitely like to follow up on that one. But apart from that, it makes other people and other expertise so accessible. So, for instance, that the program that we received has all the attendees and their contact details, and those things are really powerful. Something that you maybe not need immediately, but sometimes when there's a call for a collaboration with a specific country, or you're looking for something specific from a country, it's really great to have those contacts. And in my experience, those are the things that take your research forward. It's people that you have a relationship with in specific areas of the world.
Okay, that all makes sense. And thank you for that. Oh, let's see, one more message here. All right. Felix. Hi, Anita. As a follow-up on Stacey's question, and based on what you do at the IMDM, what do you think you would have learned, or one thing that you got from GGBN 2023 that might help improve on your biobank?
It's for me to understand what we need to live up to. It's for me to understand at what level international biobanks operate and for us to grow into that. So it was actually perfect timing because, like I said, we were approved as a biobank as part of the program 2 years ago. So I think we found our feet in the basic standards and procedures. And we are at the start of the new round. So it was, in terms of strategy, it was just perfect timing.
Thank you for that, Anita. Okay, Felix says thanks. So are there any other questions for Anita? No more questions. All right. Thank you, Anita, for that. I've made lots of notes and I'll pester you in future. But for now, Kim, would you like to share your experience?
Okay. Can you see it?
All good?
Sorry, just let me go back to the beginning now. And it says 23 slides, but remember, I'll talk very quick. All right, so attending the Global Genome Biodiversity Network Conference in Aguas Calientes, Mexico. There you can see the 5 of us standing in front of the university sign. It was a beautiful university. I think that's what impressed a lot of us, well, all of us. You'll see some of the photos a little bit later on as well. A little bit about the travel. So 11 hours from South Africa to Amsterdam, 12 hours then to Mexico City, and then just an hour to Aguas Calientes. And Mudzuli and I were highly irritated after they changed the plane in Amsterdam. We had booked right towards the back of the plane thinking that we're all smart and having these nice 2 seats next to one another, only to end up in the middle of the plane. So that was a bit of a nightmare, and it was a very small plane as well. So the seats didn't allow you much movement to sit back or even try and get some sleep. So by the time we got there, I think we were all exhausted. The travel. So we arrived in Mexico City. I don't know about the others. I think they are in agreement. We had to go from international to national side, and the national side, nobody seemed to understand what we were asking for. We were told that we had to go to Hall C, which is Salakar, and nobody could understand this. We eventually pointed to the C in Mexico to try and get people to direct us there. We eventually went to 5 different halls, and when we did find our hall, I'd asked her mother and her daughter, are we in the right area so that we, for the plane? And she said, yes. So I'm like, okay, let's just follow her. The next minute there's an announcement and everybody stands up and just takes off running. So we kind of all ran after them thinking that we're going to lose, we don't know where we are. We don't speak the language, nothing. But eventually we got to the plane. The loading of the plane is like 15 minutes. They close the door and you're on your way. So very, very prompt with that at least. This was flying over Mexico City, where the population is 20 million, just in Mexico City. So we were quite alarmed by that. Mudzuli and I were sitting next to this very interesting guy who goes to Mexico City quite a bit, and he was telling us about the population. And then that's us arriving just before midnight at the international airport in Aguas Calientes, only to find that the shuttle that was supposed to be picking us up and taking us to the hotel was not there. The friendliness of the Mexicans, excluding Mexico City national or, the national flights, so friendly because the taxi operator at the airport actually complimented us with 2 taxis that took us to our hotel. And we arrived there probably about 1 in. So a long, long, long travel. A little bit of exploring that we managed to do. Adepemi's used a couple of the photos as well. We had a good old time. That top right is Anita bartering with one of the fruit vendors because it was a type of lychee that they've got there, but it was like all fluffy and spiky. So she didn't have any cash. So she ended up giving him a bar of chocolate, I think it was, Anita. It was coming up to Halloween, which is a big festival in Mexico. So they had a lot of these displays around everywhere you look. That was Anita having a bit of a chat to one of the skeletons. Me, I hate photographs, so that was the best that I could do, was becoming a horse temporarily. And then, of course, we were all very impressed with some of the vehicles around there. There you can see Adepemi standing in front of one of the beautiful yellow Ford trucks. Mexican feasting. So the food was, what do you call it, a gastronomy or gastronomist's delight. We went out to dinner the very first night, all of us. Of course, we had to try the margaritas, and they proceeded to come to the table with this little board, that's the middle photograph, with all different little things that you could actually taste. And that seems to be a staple at some of the restaurants. As soon as you sit down, that's what they bring you. A couple of us went out another night, and there on the bottom left of the screen, it's serrano, chili, corn, and chicken broth. We thought it was some kind of shooter that was like complimentary. It wasn't. It was warm, and it was like a chicken broth with chili in it. So thank goodness for Google Translate, because that worked out amazingly, and that you can use it offline, and you can actually ask the people to speak into it, and it'll translate. So note to anybody traveling into a foreign country, download the app before you go, and you can use it offline, because that saved us a lot of times. And we even found an Irish pub in the middle of Mexico, or Aguas Calientes, that served fish and chips. So it was also a little bit random. The conference organizers, bottom right of the screen, they gave us a taste of all of the different Mexican sweets that you get. The big sherbet packets in the middle was like citric acid and salt. That's apparently a delicacy there. So that's it. We're not used to a lot of these tastes, so it was interesting getting to experience a lot of this. The icebreaker, Adepemi also mentioned about it. We went to this Costa Mia restaurant. We ended up as a group of participants somehow judging a fancy dress costume where there was Papa Smurf and what was she, Cinderella or Beauty and the Beast. So that was a lot of fun. But again, they came to the table with all of those testing things. And then, of course, this meat platter. So there was a lot of food, and I don't think anybody finished it. It was to share. It was like per 4 people, but it's very, very rich food. The cultural tour that we were taken on, it was the Museum of the Dead. It was eye-opening, and to respect other cultures as well. It was also nice to see, because a lot of their beliefs have to do with the dead and the afterlife. In some areas, it was a little bit freakish, because there were real human bones in part of the museum. And this used to be an old nunnery that they actually then converted into a museum. So we were taken around into about 4 or 5 different rooms where they had different exhibits. So proper art exhibits, and then artifacts. And you can even walk down to a little crypt where the souls went in the afterlife. And then the skull on the bottom left, that was used in a James Bond movie, apparently. So this is the venue. This was the university. Very, very pretty, beautiful grounds. And every time somebody wanted me to take a photograph, made them jump. So we've got some really good action photographs here with Mudzuli and Adepemi. There you can see, though, the amazing grounds around. The presentations that made an impression on me, Anita also said that there was a lot of mammal presentations, which I was obviously very interested in. Oliver Ryder gave the keynote talk. Oliver's also part of the IUCN Biobanking Specialist Group that Michelle and I both sit on. But then he also spoke about the urgency and ethics, a dilemma for biobanking and biodiversity discovery. People have to take note of how quickly we are losing biodiversity. And biobanks couldn't have come at a more important time. And the fact that there are all of these ethics that are involved with these collections. In South Africa, I know I was asked the question, is there not a problem? You know, how do we deal with it when people come with ownership? And in a way, we are a little bit more lucky with a wildlife collection rather than a plant collection, because the plant collection, you've got all of the indigenous knowledge and the local knowledge, and you have to be so, it has to be so fair, but also you have to be very sensitive to people's knowledge, what belongs to them, and a lot of the cultures and the lands and everything. And with plants, there's a whole other factor there. With mammals and with our biobank, we are lucky that a lot of the samples are deposited into the biobank as part of research projects. So already there, it kind of belongs to South Africa as a whole because it's collected mostly with bursary money, which is then a grant through a government organization. So there it belongs to South Africa. But we will start getting instances where we need to be a little bit more sensitive to where these samples are coming from. I know that in San Diego, a mountain lion, I think it was a mountain lion, it recently died and it had been given its radio collar name. And there was so many problems after that because the native people along the mountain range in San Diego actually said that that is their animal. So San Diego, they've got the cell lines at the frozen zoo. It starts becoming a whole problem with access. Who actually has the access right and who owns that sample? Because originally it belonged to the native people along that particular mountain range that went then down into California. Well, we will start asking questions like that sooner or later. So hearing about these ethics presentations and everything at the conference was important because it's things that we can already put in place now, so that we're not faced with those huge questions trying to answer them with no background or input when it does come about. So having that background now is very important. Also, the Vertebrate Genetic Resources Facility at the University of Kansas Biodiversity Institute. So a lot of you may know Andy Bentley as being an ex-South African, and he's also the Specify King. One of the Specify Kings, should I say, because Willem is mine. I mean, he's always helped us with our version of Specify and everything that we need. But they've also got the Kansas University, the tissue collection there. So it was so nice seeing the facility that they've got in place and how they actually manage their collection. National Institute of Standards and Technology Biorepository. So this was Rebecca Pugh, who I met years ago at ISBA. And here they do a lot of eDNA sampling from marine species. So that's also what's becoming really important. And there were quite a lot of eDNA presentations that I got a lot out of because it is becoming a critical sample to actually start preserving now as well. So it is something that I'm looking into a lot more here at our biobank, but also a lot of the researchers in SANBI, especially zoological research, they're actually having a look at eDNA now as well. So it's now, how do you actually preserve these samples for long-term use? And then something that came out, and I can't remember who actually said this, so anybody who remembers, please yell. To researchers and industry, stop writing papers and start writing standards. And then to officials, start demanding standards. They were mentioning about how many people, it's always important to a researcher or a scientist to get these publications out, these papers, all the time. But instead, they should be writing standards because everybody is reinventing the wheel over and over and over again, which costs money and time and researchers and knowledge. So instead, start publishing your standards. It's also a publication, but people should make them more readily available so that we don't have to keep on going through the same challenges all the time. That was one big thing that I got out of this conference for sure. A few others, so important considerations for biobanking and genetic rescue of endangered species. That has a big impact on mammals. So this was Ben Novak from Revive and Restore. The PCRYO Zoo, so this is a biobank of animal cell lines. I didn't even know that they existed. So this is one that I've made notes of to get in touch with, and I would like to chat to them a little bit more. I think it's nice when you can actually say what you've got and what others have got and put that knowledge together to try and come out with, so that we're not making the same mistakes. Management of genetic resources and natural history collections using specified collection management software. So again, this is Andy. And it was, so the little photograph that I took of one of his slides, you can actually see how many institutions around the world actually use Specify. And it was so nice for me because I know that we've used it. We used to use other things in the past, but this is one that we've adapted to our use, and it works fantastically. I'm a huge advocate of Specify, obviously. This one is just Nagoya Protocol on ABS and permits. So the little cartoon there is assume you've got a search warrant. So again, the permits, it's not just a South African thing, it's worldwide. A lot of slides refer to this FAIR principles, which is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, which is becoming quite important. Well, it is important already. And then there were just the two other eDNA presentations, a case study for large-scale environmental sampling, metadata collection, and data management in one of the world's fastest warming ocean regions, and then also environmental specimen banks in research and regulation for a better environmental quality. And then, of course, Nagoya. So Manuela is fantastic. She actually had a nice chat to us afterwards, and I think Mudzuli and her also connected. So why is the Nagoya protocol important for GGBN collections and biobanks? That's it. I mean, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The knowledge is out there within the community. I was an invited speaker, so I ended up giving two talks. One was a lightning talk just about our facility and how it's improved. And then also was, how do we use a biobank? So it was just biomaterials, biobanking, and bold barcoding benefits. So that was me and then Dr. Monica Mwale. And then I was also a session chair. This is the first time that they've actually had this biobanking in megadiverse countries and the Southern Hemisphere. Everybody always looks at Europe and the Americas and forgets about the actual biodiverse countries in the Southern Hemisphere. This is where all the diversity sits. So these were 6 of the presentations in the session, which were fabulous presentations and very well received. And it was so nice to see the diversity and the mega diversity in these different collections as well. So that was really nice as a first time session. And then just some of the further thoughts. So the BBSA community, you can all contribute to the GGBN document library. I am one of the task force members of the document library. So if you've got any standards, if you've got any publications that relate to any kind of biodiversity banking, you're welcome to send them to me and we can upload them onto the document library so that there's also South African representativity there as well. And then the BBSA community, you're all able to participate in the multiple task forces of the GGBN. So if any of these take your interest, then you can reach out to Katie Barker and say that you are interested in participating in any of these and add your knowledge. So there's 5 different ones. There's the data standards, document library, communication, biobank procedures, and then also the policies. And then, of course, the exciting news. We did present about South Africa hosting the 2025 conference, and we were successful. So it was just, we just had to put a little bid together. This was like literally at the last minute where they said, okay, we submitted our bid previously. I think it was end of August, beginning of September. And then all of a sudden they said, okay, well, somebody else did a presentation. So I said, well, can we also do a presentation? So this is why it was just the venue, the accommodation, our African wonder, where you can go, and it was successful. So I think that's going to be really exciting for the entire BBSA community to attend, and we're going to try and have it in conjunction with one of the other big conferences, either Spinach or ISBA. ISBA is one of the other suggestions, but that as an organizing committee, I think we'll do some of those arrangements a little bit later. And then just acknowledgements. So Michelle, obviously, for allowing us to go as the project lead. Thank you very much. Fabulous travel partners in Adepemi, Mudzuli, Leana, and Anita. SANBI for allowing me the time off, obviously, and then the BBSA as well. And just one of the things, we were the biggest group of people, and I think we probably made the most noise as well. They knew that we were there most of the time. So when we were trying to get a photograph of the 5 of us together, we were photobombed by other people. So it was actually a great conference and really good travel partners to have traveled with. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. That was a rapid speed through of a lot of interesting stuff, which I have a lot of questions about, but let me first see if others have. All right, let's see. Roger was asking, well, I know you mentioned the Nagoya Protocol. Roger was asking, was there any discussion around either the alteration of the Nagoya Protocol or the building of capacity in poorer countries to help administer permits?
No. No, nothing, not to help administer permits. I think as a community, we should be able to do that. And maybe that's something that we're actually getting out of this. And because now the question has been asked is to support one another, because it can be so frustrating sometimes So maybe that's actually something that we take out of this, is that there is a need for support. If, you know, if I come up with a good contact within bioprospecting or CITES or whatever, that we can actually share that into the community to maybe make the permitting a little bit easier.
Right. Roger, do you have any follow-ups on that?
Yeah, so we do quite a lot of work outside of South Africa, Central African Republic and DRC, and places like that are just, they just administratively, they are not equipped to deal with this kind of permitting, and it's a nightmare getting anything that looks like a proper permit. You get letters from the ministry, and the last one I got from Swaziland. It's a fishing permit, it's an angling permit. And the fisheries officer told me, no, this will do. He knows what I was doing, and he was happy with that. But when you submit that, you know, it looks terrible. And most of these poorer African countries are just not equipped to, there might be signatories, but they are not equipped to deal with this level of permitting. And it's a huge problem.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. We're trying to get samples again from CAR, and there isn't even a CITES office there. So the lady which we're getting them from, she has to travel all the way to Bangui to go and have a meeting with somebody who works in the ministry. It's not even a CITES office again. So
no, you will get a letter out of CAR. You won't get a permit.
Yeah, but if you want contacts in Swaziland, I can give you, because we've worked with the university quite a bit. So I can try and get contacts for you there, who they used anyway, the office.
Isn't the permitting authority, though?
No, I know, just the contacts. Yeah.
So I've got a permit from Swaziland, but it's an angling permit, which isn't a Nagoya contract.
No.
So that's what I'm saying. These countries are not equipped. They might have signed off on the Nagoya Protocol, but they're not equipped to permit that properly. Yeah.
Michelle, I see you want to have a go there. Feel free.
Yeah, so it looks like it was quite a small conference. How many people were actually there? I always thought these were big conferences. So that conference photo you showed, I don't know if that's the whole conference. How many people were there?
That was the whole conference, and it was very small. And they realized, I think, after COVID, that before it was between, I don't know, 50 to 80 people. Now it was very little. It was probably about 30 people in total. Because I mean, there were quite a lot of students as well. Yeah. So that's why one of the ideas was for the 2025 conferences that we do it in conjunction with somebody else.
Yeah.
And maybe make it more beneficial to the community as well.
All right. I see, Anita, you'd like to add something as well? Go ahead.
Yeah, it was quite a small group of participants, but I think for me, that made it actually more valuable. Because sometimes if a conference is too big and you have so many parallel sessions, then you actually miss some of the networking opportunities. So I suppose a small group has its benefits or its pros and cons, but for me, this was actually ideal because I think it was through 3.5 days. So the conference only started on the Monday evening. And then we, am I correct? It was a full Tuesday, full Wednesday. And I must say the days were really packed, starting early, only lunch. And the lunch was so beautiful. It was just outside the venue that the conference was hosted. And then half day on Thursday. So for those 2.5 days, you were actually together as a group, and that presented an opportunity to really kind of to forge the new relationships. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Anita, for that reflection. All right, I'm not sure we'll be able to tackle this question in the chat here, but for someone from the Mozambique Animal Biodiversity Biobank, how would they contribute to the GGBN document library, not being part of the BBSA?
No, but you can, anybody who wants to contribute to the GGBN document library, you're welcome to send me the publications or whatever, and I can upload them. So that's, anybody can actually contribute. So if you've got information that you think would benefit the entire GGBN community, please feel free to send it through and we can upload it.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thanks, Kim, although you volunteered for a lot of extra work. That's good on you. We've got another question. Katu, feel free.
Thank you, Nick. My question goes to the Mexico 5. Would you say our practices here in South Africa, or maybe let me say as a BBSA community, meet the international standards? What we are doing here, is it in line with what other biobanks are doing around the globe or across the globe? From protocols, SOPs, how we preserve our biomaterials, data management system, as well as access. Thank you.
I don't know if I'm biased if I'm asking, because also Katu's asked it, but from our biobank, I felt very proud with what we've got and what we've actually achieved over the past couple of years, especially belonging to the BBSA community, because it almost forces you to higher your standards. So what we've got in place here now, I'm very proud of, and I think we're up there with a lot of the other collections, I believe anyway. I'm comparing myself now to obviously animal collections. I don't know if any of the what everybody else thinks.
If I may, I think, Kim, you have summed it up well. What I did notice is we are on par with what I would call the developed countries. And perhaps our only challenge would be something that's not unique just to South Africa, is that funding for upkeep and maintenance and expansion of these biobanks is proving to be a challenge. But in terms of how we do the science behind it, our commitment to the Nagoya Protocol, and whatever efforts we are making to include the wide diversity of communities in the collection processes and in the management of these resources, I think we are faring very well. And it was a good representation that we were also there, because we got to see and identify what gaps we already have, perhaps in our existing collections. And that is something that we can pick up probably post this discussion to see how we can further improve our status. But yeah, you don't need to feel like we are lagging behind. I think we are on par as far as how we do things is concerned. And that was the observation that I also made. Thanks.
Anita, feel free.
I don't think, well, I can only speak for the IMBN Biobank. I don't think we are on par yet, but not operating in a silo is one of the biggest benefits. When you know and you associate with the biobanks that are on par, you are halfway there. If you know what is expected and you have the examples and you know how to contact, there's no excuse for you not to be there. So I think all the South African biobanks, and especially as part of this program, is for those who are not there, like us, we're definitely in a good position to get ourselves there in the next 2 and 3 years.
Okay, that's good to know, even for those who aren't there yet. If there are no further questions for Kim for now, no further questions, then thanks, Kim. And Leana, would you like to have a go?
Hi, everybody. Yes, let me just share my screen. Hearing correctly?
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, hi, everybody. I am Leana Freese. I represent SANParks. We have a wildlife biobank. We are based in Skukuza and in Kimberley. So I was fortunate enough to attend this conference from GGBN. And yeah, my presentation is very short and sweet. So what I picked up there was a few topics that kept coming up in the conference. That's what I wanted to talk about. So these topics that stood out for me was the lifestyle biobanking, standards and policies, exposure to other biobanks, the access benefit sharing with Indigenous people and communities, and obviously the excitement outside of the conference. So the lifestyle biobanking was emphasized by many presentations, getting cells from particular and ovarian tissues for rhinos, preservation via normal cells, skin samples. And so the reason for this lifestyle biobanking is genetic rescue, I think, preserving biodiversity, bringing today's samples to tomorrow's potential. They can be forward and expanded, so it's a renewable source, and it's a very high quality RNA and DNA. Standards and policies that I didn't know of, that came up in the presentations was the ISBER best practice recommendation for repositories. And also the Synthesis Plus, a collection of information on wide range of biodiversity biobanks and their protocols and practices, which is open access. Then there was also a mention of a Rio policy handbook on using molecular collections, which is also open access. I see Michelle shared the link to all the presentations, and all the access links are in those presentations if you want to follow them later. And like Kim, the slide that caught my attention, and which I'm very happy about, was the stop writing papers and start writing standards, and for officials to start demanding standards. I also can't remember his name, but I know he's from Finland, and it was a virtual presentation. It was nice for me to see what all of our goals are, which it's a bit elaborate, but it's nice to see like the vertebrate genetic resource facility at the University of Kansas that has thousands of tissue loans were gifted every year. They manage through Specify, and they've got a 4 to 6% growth per year. So also the other massive biobank is the biodiversity biobanking at the Natural History Museum in the UK, who has approximately 80 million specimens in reference collection with about 300 staff actively involved. So if you can see these pictures, show the massive liquid nitrogen duo flasks that they work with, which is also something to aspire to. There's a lot of talk about benefit sharing with Indigenous people and communities. Some sentences that got my attention was the monetary and non-monetary benefits from utilizing of genetic resources and digital sequence information, traditional knowledge associated, are shared fairly and equitable as appropriate with Indigenous people and local communities. Also touched a lot on access benefit sharing, how the genetic material can be accessed, how benefits resulting from the use are shared between users, the people, institutions, and countries, and also the providers, the people, institutions, and countries that provide them. And also lots of talk about the Mavhunga protocol, which I wasn't familiar with. So what did I gain? Also the knowledge. I learned a lot about things that I didn't know about, the networking opportunities that were spoken about by the other participants. Some confidence in what we have is not too bad, because sometimes you doubt yourself. And then inspiration to achieve our goals, to look at what other people have and to align your route with what you do every day to achieve those goals. And I think there's been a lot of talk about the extraterrestrial activities. So I've just got a few photos of what we saw. Kim spoke about the Museum of Death, and they spoke about the food. And Aquasquale is a lovely town. I have to agree with that. With a trip up a mountain, which was supposed to be just a short hike, it turned into a 2-kilometer vertical hike. And at the end, the other lady from the conference said that was actually called the Hill of Death. And now I agree to it that it was true. That's all from me. Very short and sweet.
Thanks, Leana. That was very informative, especially the part about us not about the Hill of Death. So that's something for us to avoid if ever we find ourselves there. Are there any questions for Leana? Doesn't look like that at the moment. So then I have a question about the benefit sharing with the Indigenous peoples and the communities. How are we doing our South African biobanks relative to the ones in, I guess, either our fellow developing countries or the more developed countries? Was that covered, or how do you think we're doing?
Well, from what I can pick up is, well, we certainly don't. I've never thought of that, or that even existed, and it's quite an eye-opener to realize that is actually a thing. But from the wild-type biobanks, I don't think anybody's really doing something regarding that. Someone else can correct me.
Anyone else want to jump in there?
Hi, Nick. We might not be, I think, from a biobanks perspective, quite active in the space of benefit sharing, but I'm not sure if you are aware of natural justice. There is a rooibos biocultural protocol which allows the communities to benefit from commercialized production and sales of rooibos. So there is some activity. I think it will, from my limited knowledge, take a while for this to become integrated in and woven into how we do research at community level or with Indigenous peoples, respecting their rights and their custodianship over the natural resources in those areas. But there is some activity, at least I'm aware that the rooibos issue is stemming from benefit sharing protocols, Nagoya and all that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mudzuli. That's helpful. Something to follow up on as well. Are there any other questions at the time? Nothing. All right. I do have follow-ups, but let me rather not, since we're running a bit over time or heading that way. So then let's move on. Thanks, Leana, for everything you said. Mudzuli, would you like to go ahead?
Thanks, Nick. Okay. Good day, everyone. Mudzuli here. I am the Plant Biobank Curator at the Pretoria National Botanical Gardens. And as a last speaker, I anticipated that a lot of the images and general discussions around our collective experience would be covered before. So I have kind of just focused on some of the things that I took away from this conference, and will share that with you. So in terms of the key highlights, I found that biobanking is a force to be reckoned with at the moment. It is growing, and it is our time to actually be active as a community in this space, particularly when we are talking about biodiversity in a developing country like ours. It was also lovely to see that while most of the work is either from human biobanks, I mean, in terms of publication and visibility, and most of wildlife, that we had a huge representation of everything from plant biobanks to algae to yeasts to fungi, and that was just an indication of how active people are at the moment in the space of biodiversity banking. I just also wanted to pick up on some of the tools that people kept falling back on through the broad offering of the discussions. And one, I think, tool that I thought was very interesting was the use by the Bulgarians of drones to actually actively monitor algal blooms and also use that technology as a sampling tool at their disposal. And there was one that was also looking at the use of GSI mapping for sample collection. So if we were to look at botanical specimen sampling, those maps would then be used to identify and locate exactly where specimen was taken. I thought that was also something that we as biobankers could look into, how we integrate those into our day-to-day activities. One of the things that also came up was, the use of storage of samples that you want to use for whole genome sequencing in -80s. And I think it was the gentleman from Mexico, if I'm not mistaken, who had spoken about the quality of samples degrading over time when they stored at -80, and that those samples could then not be used for genome sequencing, but just targeted sequencing. That they are go-to at the moment for liquid nitrogen. I thought that would also be quite something to take note of for those who actually are looking at whole genome sequencing for whatever species they are working on. The other thing that is growing that I noted, and I know that South Africa is also active in that space, is eDNA monitoring. And this is versus, individual species monitoring, that DNA is collected from the environment is able to be used for unpacking the changes over time within an ecosystem, also understanding what those ecosystem compositions are. And this was mostly for microbes and oceans and whatnot, but I feel like it's something that we, if there are community members in this space, that's something that could be used to better unpack the biodiversity in our various ecosystems and to better understand what we have or what we had for that matter. And when it comes to the GGBN, not only being the host of the conference, I found that, there was a lot of discussion about how GGBN is received well within the communities as a facilitating or coordinating, and I will use the term infrastructure, borrowing from what the BBSA is, which allows scientists from across the globe who are operating within biobanking to actually access these resources that are put together. So if you go, for instance, to YouTube, there is a myriad of videos that explain different protocols for sampling, and they've got materials and literature that's accessible. And that's also helpful, I think, for biobankers to work towards standardizing protocols, SOPs, the way in which we store our samples and all that. It was also nice to see that the continent has representation. We had a gentleman, I think it was from Uganda, if I'm not mistaken, who also presented on what they are doing with their biobanking, which had started off as a wing within their university. But now they are expanding and trying to grow that sector, and SANBI is apparently involved in assisting them with their setup. So we are making progress, and I think we are, as the SANBI seed, and I speak for Victoria as well, and the Plant Biobank are well positioned to continue building traction on the continent to fill in the gaps as much as we are doing for our South African context. Something that also stood out for me was the importance of cryobanking viable cells. I don't know if it's applicable for the Indigenous plant biobank, but the cryobanked black-footed ferret viable cells of a male and a female were used to restore near extinct species into the wild. And I think there's also a scope for us to realize that beyond just biobanking non-viable cells, there's an opportunity to actually participate in filling in the gaps where extinction or species are threatened with extinction. And some of the emerging or trending issues that I picked up were around funding, that some of the biobanks are still not government funded. So the universities would be the custodians and sourcing for funds to maintain those. But there is an increase. The UK is such an example, South Africa with the BBSA. And I think when we spoke about Brazil, it was also the same. They are looking at their interest in wanting to participate or collaborate with us. Is they are looking at also building a network of biodiversity biobanks, as they've got one set up for linking biodiversity and health. But although the resources are limited and the challenges will remain in terms of establishing robust networks of biobanks that would cover every aspect of the biodiversity within a country, we are making strides. And although South Africa and of course the African continent was underrepresented at the GGBN conference this year, a reflection that we are lagging behind, it was also lovely to see that there's a lot of activity involving African specimens that's happening and being stored in international biobanks. And I think it brings home the question about how then do we identify where all these resources are seated, and how do we then collaborate to ensure that local biobanks can also be co-custodians of those materials. The other thing that I thought was quite interesting, and it speaks to the question about benefit sharing that Nick also asked about, is that not everybody is a signatory to the Nagoya Protocol, and even those that are, there's still gaps in terms of understanding how it should be implemented. I cannot speak to how well we are doing in South Africa, but we've got the Rooibos example as an establishment or the potential for us to actually build up house rules about how we conduct research with Indigenous communities and how we ensure that it's just not removal of things with no benefit to the Indigenous communities that are actually the custodians of that biodiversity. The other thing that I would like to, I think, highlight, I felt that when it came to data, there were just so many challenges in terms of how data is made accessible to the biobanking community. There are many biobanks that host their own local or internal databases and not make those open access for the communities. There's also too many aggregates, and the choice between which one to use and how fluidly one can extract that data was also a challenge. And when we had a discussion at the end of the conference, the GGBN community members sat together, there was a call to actually look at, pulling all these data bases or aggregates together to ensure ease of access to that much needed information, and also that it is easier for people to actually deposit their sample data. There were issues that were raised by others, that there's also difficulty in knowing how to package your specimen information and the linked metadata into one of these myriad of aggregates that are available. And so it speaks to also the issue with standardization, that the community generally feels there is lack of standardization, although the GGBN provides a platform for us to actually put together SOPs, put together documents and protocols for how we would want to go about biobanking in the different taxonomic groups that we work in. There is still lack of standardization in that area. There are also issues with how data can be accessed, including samples and collections that are in all these different biobanks, and mainly centered around these being kept as private collections. Someone spoke, I will not remember who, about people not actually wanting to share. And so it brings home or drives home the need for us as biobankers to actually develop robust strategies around communication and how we make biobanking fashionable, how we make biobanking integral to each and every species survival, including humanity, and ensure that the communities within and outside of the scientific fraternity understand the importance of biobanking and the importance of biodiversity conservation in that manner. The other thing that was raised by the keynote speaker was that one of the things that is common across the globe is there is a lack of skilled biobanking specialists and researchers. And if we use South Africa as an example, there isn't training platforms for someone who says, I just want to go into biobanking. So that's also a challenge that would need to be addressed if we want to strengthen the skill sets and the interest in the biobanking sector. And so just to sum up with some personal reflections, I felt the program was really jam-packed with good topics, but it was so tightly packed that sometimes we had limited opportunities to actually unpack the topics that were being discussed in each of those sections. The issues around biobanking and benefit sharing, there is an understanding, and so that session that we had, the protocol, was also instrumental in helping the attendees to understand somewhat what the documents contains and what is expected of the global community. Implementation, some countries are making strides. I was really digging through my notes to see if I would have found it, but there are countries that are actually fining people for contravening these Nagoya protocols and areas around benefit sharing. So there is opportunity even for us as a community to maybe gather around the table and discuss how we could assist our country and our scientists to actually recognize and implement these issues. And in terms of community involvement and developing policies and the issues, the bioethical issues around justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, I felt that most of the biobanking work that has happened over the past few decades has been material in context of South Africa, material extracted from South Africa or from the African continent, and it is time to balance that and bring things into equilibrium. It also is urgent that the community actually focuses on standardizing policies. Kim focused on that rather people should stop writing these publications about subjects that they are only interested in, but we look at publishing protocols, publishing SOPs to ensure that the community works in a uniform manner. And also to involve Indigenous people earlier on in the project. That was also something that was highlighted. Mexico is doing very well in ensuring that communities are involved and that the Nagoya protocols are implemented. And I think I've also spoken about this, and you would have heard from previous speakers, that it's time we move away from working in silos and rather look at how we can integrate all the biobanks and all the platforms that we have for data sharing and data management to ensure that the communities are not reinventing the wheel with our limited resources, which is also a problem across the globe. And with that, I want to thank you for listening, and thank you to the BBSA for awarding us this opportunity to travel to Mexico to form collaborative relationships with other biobankers from across the globe, and for all the institutions that are involved in participating within the Biodiversity Biobanks network. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. It does sound like it was jam-packed with interesting stuff, as you were saying there. I know we're running a bit over time. Thank you all for sticking with us so far. And if you'd like to stick with and just ask a few more questions, are there any for Mudzuli? Okay, not at present, it looks like. Then I have one, but I guess that's more for the whole group. So let's just see. Are there any questions for all the panelists? Any particular panelists? Okay, no one has stepped forward yet, so let me then ask. Several of you mentioned the stop writing papers, start writing standards, and get officials to start the demanding standards. Were there any practical suggestions for incentives for that? Anybody? I mean, for the writing of standards are useful, but getting officials to want to use those standards or anything like that. And then for the writing of standards, the incentives for people to stop publishing their small papers and look at the bigger picture. Anything discussed like that?
Not in that detail, well, not that I remember anyway, or recall from the presentation where it was actually discussed. But the thing that I got out of that is like even your SOPs, for example, how we store FTA paper, the blood on FTA paper here is a little bit different than the way that they store FTA paper at the Natural History Museum. So instead of us encountering possible problems, you know, putting that out as like a little SOP or a little standard and publishing into something like the Biobanking journal, it's still a publication. I don't think there should be too much red tape with things like that. I don't know actually who reviews the standards going into some of the journals anyway. It could be a technical report. I don't think there should be bureaucracy though involved with it.
Okay, that sounds promising, I guess. Michelle, would you like to go ahead and ask something?
Yeah, so I think it's just comments related to this publishing of SOPs or standards. So I think what I've been interested in hearing about, and it's mostly through the IUCN Specialist Group for Animal Biobanking. So there is that huge best practice. There's the ISPA best practice for biobanking, and that's openly accessible. Then there was also the paper by somebody and Jonas Astron, where they've got all the different types of standards and procedures for different kinds of biobanks and different kinds of samples. And then the IUCN, I think it's the Conservation Genetics Specialist Group, are also publishing procedures and standards for biobanking. So I think that internationally there's a lot happening, but where the gaps in that, it might be valuable to publish. But you have to find the right kind of journal. It's not normal research unless you've validated your SOP. So if you've done some testing of the effects of that SOP that you're doing, that would be better than just publishing what you do. And then also just to say that the BBSA has also joined ISPA. So we've also, we are a member of ISPA, and so we do get access to that biobanking journal. We've got, I think it's 8 licenses. So that the participating institutions could each have a license for the journal. So yeah, I think it is something, there's lots happening in this space. I think read the documents that are already out there. Don't go off and write your own without first referring to those. Thanks.
Michelle, sounds like there's a lot of reading there. Okay, since we're way over time, let's just check one last time. Any more questions or comments? Okay, if there are no more, then I'd just say thanks everyone for being here. Thanks for the participants for sharing the experience, and we'll just let Michelle close us off.
Yeah, so just thanks everybody for joining us. I think I really enjoyed hearing all the different aspects of the conference and different perspectives. It was really interesting. So thank you to Anita, Adepemi, Mudzuli, Kim, and Leana for their presentations. And thanks for the questions and the discussion. I think what was highlighted today is the importance of us getting together more often and talking about some of these key issues that have come out. It's not just us who are working our way through things like access and benefit sharing, and community engagement and standards and processes. It's a global thing, but I think for us, even at a national level, to get together and try and work on some of these issues that are out there at the moment. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we hope we will have many more of these types of engagement sessions next year as well. And thanks to Nick for organizing everything for us. Thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.